My husband hid the fact that he had a son with another woman, and when I found out, I still can't believe how quickly everything spiraled out of control. One moment, I was standing in the middle of a fairy tale engagement party, surrounded by friends, family, and the love of my life. The next, my half-sister, Melanie, barged in and shattered everything. Let me back up. Lucas and I had been planning this party for months. We wanted something elegant but not over the top, a warm, intimate gathering with the people who mattered most. The venue was a beautiful rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, decked out in soft string lights and floral arrangements. Candles flickered on every table, casting a golden glow over our guests. The music was soft, the wine was flowing, and everything was perfect. Except for one thing. Melanie. My half-sister and I have a complicated history. She's older by 6 years, and to put it mildly, we do not get along. We have different fathers, and while I grew up in a relatively stable home, she bounced between our mom and her dad, who was an absolute disaster. She never let me forget that she had it worse, as if it was somehow my fault. Every holiday, every family event turned into a minefield with her. So when I invited her, I expected the usual response. And sure enough, she declined. I don't think it's a good idea, she texted back. I'll just ruin it, and I don't want to be that person. Enjoy your night. Fine by me. The night started beautifully. Lucas was a dream, always by my side, introducing me to his relatives, whispering sweet things in my ear. My best friend, Harper, was already a few glasses of wine deep, pulling me onto the dance floor between conversations. Everything was exactly how I had imagined it. Until 3.5 hours in, I was mid-conversation with Lucas's aunt when the restaurant doors swung open, and there she was. Melanie. She looked disheveled, her long, dark hair wild, eyes frantic. She was carrying her 7-year-old son, Evan, on her hip, his arms locked around her neck like a vice. His face was buried in her shoulder. He was sobbing. The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop. Melanie wasn't supposed to be here. And she definitely wasn't supposed to be here like this. Lucas reached for my hand, his grip tightening. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. Melanie spotted me instantly and made a beeline toward me, her heels clicking against the floor in sharp, angry beats. Emma. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. I need you. My throat went dry. What are you doing here? She ignored me. Please. Just help me. I looked around, expecting someone to step in, but everyone was just staring. Melanie, Then, Evan screamed. Not a cry, not a whimper, a blood-curdling, piercing scream. The kind that made every hair on my body stand up. The kind of scream that made your instinct scream danger. And then I saw it. The sleeve of his tiny shirt was soaked in blood. Panic surged through me. Oh my God, what happened? Melanie was breathing hard. She looked around, eyes darting like a cornered animal. I can't, not here. Please, just help me. I grabbed her arm and started pulling her toward a more private spot, my heart racing. Lucas followed, along with Harper and my older cousin, Daniel, who was a cop. We ducked into the restaurant's back hallway, away from the prying eyes of our stunned guests. Once the door shut behind us, I turned to Melanie. Talk. She was shaking. We were at home. He was playing in his room, and then she swallowed hard. Someone broke in. My blood went cold. Broke in? Lucas echoed. What do you mean? She clenched her jaw, blinking back tears. Someone came into my house. I don't know who. I don't know why. But they hurt him. I felt dizzy. I looked at Evan again. His face was streaked with tears, and he was still clutching Melanie so hard his little fingers were turning white. His whole body trembled. Daniel immediately stepped forward, pulling out his phone. Did you call the police? Melanie's expression changed. Just for a second. Something flickered. A hesitation. No. Daniel's face hardened. Why the hell not? Melanie's breathing was erratic. Because I didn't know if I could. Lucas frowned. What does that mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to me, grabbing my hands. Emma, please. I need you. My heart was hammering. For what? Melanie swallowed hard. I need a place to stay. Silence. She wasn't asking for medical help. She wasn't asking for the police. She wanted a place to hide. Daniel stepped between us. No way. We're calling this in. He raised his phone. If someone broke in and hurt a kid, the police need to handle it. Melanie lunged for him. No. You don't understand. The desperation in her voice made my stomach churn. Daniel didn't waver. Then make me understand. She opened her mouth, then shut it. And that's when I realized she was lying. The air felt thick, suffocating. I suddenly saw everything too clearly, the way she hadn't called 911, the way she'd just shown up here instead of a hospital, the strange way she wouldn't explain what happened. My head spun. Melanie, what did you do? Her face crumbled. And then, from behind us, a deep voice rumbled, one I didn't recognize. There you are. We all turned. A man stood at the end of the hallway, tall, dark hair, dressed in all black, and holding a gun. Evan whimpered and buried his face in Melanie's shoulder. Melanie froze. Lucas grabbed my wrist. Harper gasped. Daniel instinctively reached for his belt, but he wasn't armed. The man took a slow step forward. Melanie, he said, almost lazily, you shouldn't have run. Melanie's fingers tightened on Evan, and then she bolted. I stood frozen as Melanie bolted, gripping Evan so tightly I thought she might crush him. The man with the gun took a step forward, but Daniel reacted first, shoving me behind him and raising his hands in a slow, deliberate motion. Hey, let's talk about this, Daniel said, his cop instincts kicking in. Melanie was already halfway through the hallway, pushing through the doors back into the main event space, my engagement party. The man's side like this was all just a mild inconvenience to him. She's making this worse for herself. Lucas was gripping my arm so hard it hurt. I could feel his heart hammering against my back. Who the hell is that? He whispered. I don't know, I admitted, my mind spinning. Harper was the first to snap out of it. We need to go. She grabbed my wrist and started pulling me after Melanie. The moment we pushed through the doors, the energy in the room shifted. Everyone had stopped. The music had cut out. People were whispering, exchanging confused glances, craning their necks toward the front where Melanie now stood, her breath ragged. Evan had his face buried in her chest, sobbing quietly. And then I saw what was in her other hand. A microphone. Oh no. Melanie, I called out, my voice sharp with warning. What are you doing? She ignored me. Her chest heaved. Her fingers curled tighter around the microphone. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, she said, her voice echoing through the speakers, trembling but loud. I was going to let you have your moment, Emma. A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. I could see my parents stiffen at one of the corner tables. Lucas's mother, Victoria, pressed a hand to her chest. I took a step forward, my pulse racing. Melanie, stop. She turned to me, her face twisting with something ugly. Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? I swallowed hard. You're making a scene. Melanie laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You want to talk about making a scene? She turned back to the audience, her eyes burning. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a confession to make. I felt sick. Don't. She did anyway. I have been betrayed. By my own sister. Her voice cracked on the last word, and it was so convincing that I could already see some of the guests leaning in, drawn to the drama. You all see this perfect little engagement party, this beautiful bride-to-be, this devoted fiancé. But what you don't see is the truth. Melanie. She stole my husband. The room erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, a chair scraping across the floor. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lucas stiffened beside me. What? Melanie pointed at me, her hand shaking. Emma, my sister. You stole Lucas from me. The ground beneath me tilted. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. Lucas's grip on my arm tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Melanie's face crumpled like she was about to cry. You really don't remember? Her voice was soft, wounded. You don't remember what we had? I turned to Lucas, desperate for an answer. His face was a mixture of horror and confusion. We never had anything, he said slowly. Melanie, I don't. What are you doing? She ignored him and reached into her purse, pulling out a stack of papers. You think I'm making this up? She turned back to the crowd, waving the papers like a preacher spreading the gospel. I have proof. The murmurs turned into a full-on roar. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Proof of what? Melanie's lips trembled. That Evan is Lucas's son. The world tilted. My lungs stopped working. Lucas went rigid beside me. What? His voice was barely a whisper. Melanie took a shaky breath. I tried to keep this a secret, Emma. I really did. But you don't get to marry my child's father while pretending I don't exist. She lifted the stack of papers. I have text messages, photos, a DNA test. I felt like I was drowning. That's insane. She turned the papers so the guests could see them, shaking as she held them up. Text messages between us. From before you two were engaged. My vision blurred as I saw the printouts. Messages between Melanie and someone saved as Lucas on her phone. I miss you. We need to talk about Evan. I still think about that night. My stomach twisted violently. Harper grabbed my arm. Emma, she whispered. What the fuck? I turned to Lucas. Tell them it's fake. He didn't respond immediately, just long enough for the whole room to notice. My heart nearly stopped. Lucas. He turned to me, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and Melanie. Something was wrong. Melanie saw it too, and she smiled. See? He knows. The murmurs grew louder. People were whispering, staring. My mother looked like she might faint. Lucas finally spoke, his voice hoarse. This isn't true. But he hesitated. It was small, a fraction of a second, but I saw it. And so did Melanie. She took a step forward. Are you sure? Her voice was eerily soft. Are you absolutely sure? Lucas clenched his jaw. I never slept with you. She inhaled sharply, like she'd been slapped. Then she looked back at the crowd. But he doesn't deny that he could be the father. I felt a rush of cold spread through my chest. Victoria, Lucas's mother, stood up abruptly. Lucas, is there any chance? Her voice was shaking. Any chance at all? Lucas didn't answer. That was all it took. The dam broke. People started talking. Not whispering anymore, talking. I backed up, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Harper grabbed my wrist. Emma, we need to get out of here. I looked at Lucas, searching for something, anything, but his face was unreadable. Melanie watched me, eyes full of something dark and triumphant. And then she delivered the final blow. If I'm lying, she said, voice trembling with emotion. Why did you take a paternity test? The entire room stopped. Lucas's face drained of color. I swayed on my feet. What? Melanie lifted a folded paper from her pile and dropped it on the floor. Silence. I reached for it with trembling hands, unfolding the paper with icy fingers. My eyes scanned it frantically. Paternity test results. Lucas Bennett, 99.99% probability. I heard a ringing in my ears. My vision blurred. I looked up at Lucas, and for the first time, I saw it in his eyes. Fear. The ride home was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The kind that strangles you. I sat in the passenger seat of Lucas's car, staring blankly at the darkened streets flashing by, my body rigid, my stomach a knot of nausea. My engagement ring felt heavy on my finger, like it didn't belong there anymore. My ears were still ringing from the party, from the gasps, the whispers, the cold, damning silence when Lucas hesitated. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't immediately denied it. And now I needed answers. I waited until we pulled into the garage of our house. The moment the car was in park, I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to him. Talk. Lucas ran a hand down his face. He looked drained. His usual confident composure shattered. Emma, No, my voice came out cold, emotionless. You don't get to sit there looking exhausted. I'm the one who just found out that my fiancé might have a son with my sister. My breath hitched. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? He exhaled sharply. You think I wasn't blindsided too? Then explain it. His jaw tightened. He looked at me, and for the first time tonight, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt. My stomach clenched. Oh my God. My voice dropped to a whisper. You did sleep with her. Lucas's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. My breath came out shaky. When? He looked down, swallowing hard. About 7 years ago. I flinched. 7 years. Right before Evan was born. I felt like the ground had cracked beneath me. You knew. No, his head snapped up. No, Emma. I swear to God, I didn't know about the kid. I never knew. I stared at him, my heart racing. Then why did you take a paternity test? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Because Melanie cornered me a month ago. The world blurred for a second. A month ago? She showed up at my office, he admitted, his voice thick. I didn't even know she worked in the city. She walked in like she belonged there, shut the door, and told me we needed to talk. My fingers dug into my thighs. And Lucas hesitated. That hesitation was a knife to the gut. Lucas, I said through clenched teeth. What did she say? His Adam's apple bobbed. She told me Evan was mine. My breath hitched. And you didn't think to mention that to me? His head fell back against the seat. Emma, he exhaled. I thought she was lying. I thought she was trying to mess with me. We weren't even. He stopped himself, shaking his head. I didn't think it was possible. Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. What do you mean you weren't even? Lucas was silent, and that silence terrified me. I turned to him fully. Say it. His eyes met mine, something fractured in them. Emma, I don't remember sleeping with her. I blinked. What? I mean, I don't remember how it happened. His voice was tight. I know we were at the same party. I was drinking. I was really drunk. And the next morning, I woke up, and she was just there. I felt the air leave my lungs. Are you saying she? I couldn't finish the sentence. His fingers flexed on his knee. I don't know. He looked at me, his eyes dark. I don't remember agreeing to anything. I don't remember doing anything. His voice dropped lower. And she never mentioned it after. My skin felt ice cold. This was worse. This was so much worse. Because now, there were more questions. And the answers were even more terrifying. I stared at him, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. So you just, what? Forgot? Moved on with your life? Lucas shut his eyes briefly. I was 19, Emma. It was one bad night. I didn't think it meant anything. Something cracked in my chest. It meant something to her. He exhaled sharply. I don't even know if she's telling the truth. You saw how she ambushed us. You saw the way she planned that. She's trying to ruin us. I was shaking. But the DNA test could be fake. I froze. Lucas leaned forward, eyes desperate. You think Melanie wouldn't lie? You think she wouldn't go this far to destroy you? This is Melanie. I swallowed. The words made sense. She had always hated me. She had always wanted to see me suffer. But the papers, the test. I took a deep breath, trying to find solid ground beneath my feet. Then why did you go through with the test? Lucas dragged a hand over his face. Because I had to be sure. I felt like I was about to break. And he hesitated again. Terror surged through me. Lucas. He met my eyes, something raw and exposed in his face. It hasn't come back yet. I blinked. My body had been bracing for impact, for the worst, but the worst was still unknown. The ground beneath me was shifting, unstable, and I didn't know where to step next. The rage, the betrayal, the humiliation. I didn't know where to direct it. At Melanie? At Lucas? At myself for not seeing the cracks in the foundation of my own relationship? Lucas reached for my hands. Emma, I swear to you, I never cheated on you. I never even looked at your sister like that. This whole thing, it's some kind of sick revenge. You know what she's like. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the truth was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. I pulled my hands away. I need time. My voice was hoarse, unsteady. Lucas's face fell. Emma, I shook my head. I need to think. Without waiting for a response, I opened the car door, stepping into the cold night air. Lucas didn't follow, and I didn't look back. I couldn't sleep. After the disaster of my engagement party and the bombshell that Lucas might have a son, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melanie's smug, triumphant face. I heard the gasps from the guests. I felt the weight of doubt pressing down on my chest. Lucas swore he didn't remember anything from that night 7 years ago. That Melanie had cornered him out of nowhere. That she was lying. But then why did she have a paternity test? The only thing I knew for sure was that Melanie had lied before. And if there was even a chance that she was lying again, I had to find out. Which is how I found myself stalking her ex-husband. I sat in my car outside a bar on the rougher side of town, gripping my phone in my lap. I had spent hours digging, searching for Derek Miller, Melanie's ex-husband, the man who had raised Evan. Derek had been a mystery for years. He and Melanie had a volatile, chaotic relationship filled with fights, breakups, and reconciliations. When they finally divorced, Melanie had painted him as a deadbeat, a monster who didn't want to take care of his own son. But now, I was questioning everything. I had found him through an old Facebook account, one that hadn't been updated in years but still had his workplace listed, a mechanic shop on the outskirts of town. A few searches later, I found out where he drank. And now, I was waiting. The bar was dimly lit, neon lights flickering above the entrance. It was the kind of place that smelled like stale beer and regret, the kind of place where people want to disappear. And then I saw him. Derek. He was taller than I remembered, broad-shouldered, with messy dark hair and tired eyes. He had a 5 o'clock shadow and wore a leather jacket that had definitely seen better days. He looked rough, but also not like the monster Melanie had always described. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my purse and got out of the car. Inside, the bar was crowded, loud. I weaved through the people until I reached him, taking a deep breath before speaking. Derek? He turned, confused at first. Then his eyes widened slightly. Emma? I nodded. He frowned, setting his beard down. What the hell are you doing here? I hesitated. I need to talk to you. His jaw tightened. About Melanie? I exhaled. About Evan. Derek stiffened. His entire posture changed, going rigid. I pulled out my phone and opened the article I had saved. The one with the photo from my engagement party, the one that had gone viral. I slid it across the bar toward him. Did you see this? Derek barely glanced at it. Yeah. He picked up his beer. Why? I swallowed. Because Melanie announced that Lucas is Evan's real father. Derek didn't react. Not shocked. Not angry. Nothing. I studied him, my heartbeat quickening. You knew. He let out a dry laugh. I had a feeling. A wave of nausea rolled through me. She told you? He shook his head, gripping his beer tighter. Melanie never told me anything. She just never let me take a test. My breath hitched. Derek took a long sip of beer before slamming it down. I always had doubts, he admitted. From the moment she told me she was pregnant. The timing never made sense. We were on and off. Mostly off. But she swore up and down Evan was mine. Wouldn't even discuss the idea of a test. My skin went cold. But you paid child support. His expression darkened. $250,000. I felt like I was going to be sick. She bled me dry, he said bitterly. The court took her word for it. She showed up with tears, told them I was trying to abandon my kid. I didn't have the money to fight it. His hands curled into fists, and she made sure I never saw him much. Just enough that I believed it was possible. Rage burned through me. Melanie had been lying to him for years. She had stolen from him, taken everything she could, money, time, hope. And now, she was trying to do the same to me. I took a shaky breath. Would you still take a test? Derek's jaw clenched. In a heartbeat, 2 days later, we had the results. Derek was not Evan's father. The second I read the words, my hands started shaking. I sat in my car outside the lab, gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled in my fists. Melanie had been lying for 7 years. I dialed Derek's number with trembling fingers. He picked up immediately. You got it? I exhaled sharply. You're not the father. Silence. Then a slow, bitter laugh. That bitch. I closed my eyes. What are you going to do? He didn't even hesitate. I'm suing her. My stomach flipped. I want my money back, Derek said coldly. Every last cent. A chill ran down my spine. This was war. I spent the next 2 days in a daze, barely eating, barely sleeping. My mind kept replaying the engagement party, the whispers, the look on Lucas's face when Melanie dropped that paternity test on the floor. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that this was just another one of Melanie's twisted games. But there was a sliver of doubt, and that sliver was eating me alive. By the 3rd day, I had made up my mind. I couldn't live in limbo. I needed proof. So I confronted Lucas. He was in the kitchen when I found him, gripping a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his normally perfect posture slouched. I didn't care. You need to take the test, I said. Lucas froze. Slowly, he set the mug down on the counter. Emma. No, I cut him off. No excuses. No delays. No bullshit. We are not sweeping this under the rug. His jaw clenched. You think I don't want answers too? I crossed my arms. Then why are you stalling? I'm not stalling. His voice was sharp, defensive. Then take the test. His eyes flickered with something. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell anymore. Emma, do you even hear yourself? My voice cracked. Lucas, if you know you didn't sleep with her, if you're so sure, then why are you acting like this? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Because I'm scared. Okay? The admission caught me off guard. Scared of what? He looked at me then, eyes dark and full of something raw. What if it's true? Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hands down on the counter. Then you should have told me the second Melanie showed up at your office. You don't get to be scared, Lucas. I'm the one living in this nightmare. His expression twisted. You think I'm enjoying this? Then take the damn test. Silence. I saw the moment he broke. His shoulders sagged. His hands clenched into fists. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Fine, he said quietly. I'll do it. We took the test the next morning. It was a blur. Driving to the clinic, Lucas signing paperwork with stiff fingers, the sterile smell of the room as they took his sample. He barely looked at me the entire time. And then, we waited. 5 days. Each one felt like a lifetime. By the time the call came, I was a wreck. I answered the phone with trembling hands, my heart pounding so loud I barely heard the nurse's voice on the other end. The results are in, she said. Would you like to come in for a copy? Or should I read them over the phone? I forced myself to breathe. Over the phone is fine. There was a pause, a shuffle of papers, and then, the probability of paternity is 99.99%. I stopped breathing. The words echoed. 99.99%. I heard myself whisper, "You're sure?" "Yes, ma'am. Lucas Bennett is the biological father." The phone slipped from my fingers. I barely heard Lucas's voice behind me. "Emma?" I turned to him, numb. "It's true." He paled. "What?" The words burned in my throat. "Evan is yours." Lucas stumbled back like I had hit him. He shook his head. No. That's not possible." But it was. It was real. Melanie wasn't lying. I felt something inside me shatter. Lucas looked at me, eyes wild with panic. "Emma, I swear to God, I couldn't hear him. I couldn't process anything. All I knew was that my fiancé, the man I trusted, the man I loved, had a child with my sister. And I didn't know if I could ever look at him the same way again." I barely had time to process the fallout of Lucas's paternity test before another bomb dropped. Melanie had scammed multiple men. The first crack in her story came from Derek. He wasted no time after getting his negative paternity results. Within 2 days, he had his lawyer draft a lawsuit. $250,000. Every single cent of child support he had paid over the years. And he wasn't alone. Because there was another man. His name was Alex Carter. And he was furious. I first heard about Alex through Derek. He called me late at night, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You're never gonna believe this," he said, practically laughing. I wasn't in the mood. Believe what? Melanie wasn't just bleeding me dry. She got another guy too. My heart skipped. What? Some guy named Alex Carter. She had him paying for Evan's private school, medical bills, all kinds of shit. Derek let out a dry chuckle. And get this, he actually thought he was the dad. My blood ran cold. Derek sent me a link. A Facebook post. Alex Carter had written a long, angry update, exposing Melanie for the fraud she was. For 7 years, I believed Evan was mine. I loved him like my own. I paid for everything. His school, his clothes, his future. Melanie told me she wasn't sure about paternity, but she refused to let me test him. Now, after all this time, I find out she's been lying, not just to me, but to another man. I am taking legal action. I will be suing for every dollar I gave her. And most importantly, I will be fighting for custody of Evan. He deserves better than this. He deserves the truth. I read the post 3 times. Melanie had conned multiple men into thinking they were Evan's father. She had played them, manipulated them, and stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now, they were both suing her. Within days, Melanie's entire world collapsed. The lawsuits alone were enough to ruin her. She had no way of paying back Derek's $250,000, and Alex's suit was demanding even more. His lawyer wasn't just seeking reimbursement for expenses, he was filing for full custody. And the court sided with him. The day of the custody hearing was a storm of chaos. I wasn't there, but Derek kept me updated. They ripped her apart. He told me over the phone. The judge hated her. She tried playing the victim, tried crying, saying she only wanted the best for Evan. He snorted. Didn't work. She lost custody? I asked, barely believing it. Completely. Evan's living with Alex now. I sat down, gripping the edge of my kitchen table. Melanie had been Evan's only parent for years. And now, she had nothing. She fought it? I asked. Derek scoffed. Of course. She screamed at the judge, called Alex a liar, told him he was a terrible father. Which was hilarious, considering she's the one who conned him for money. The judge shut it down immediately. She has no rights left. A strange, hollow feeling settled in my chest. Melanie wasn't just exposed. She was destroyed. But it got worse. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Emma? The voice was low, rough. I frowned. Who is this? Alex Carter. I sat up straighter. Oh, I wanted to thank you, he said, for pushing Derek to take that test. If he hadn't, I never would have known the truth. I hesitated. How's Evan? Alex exhaled. Confused. Sad. But adjusting. He paused. I wanted to ask you something. I gripped the phone. Okay. Did Melanie ever tell you about the money? I frowned. What money? The extra payments, he said. The ones outside of child support. Something cold settled in my stomach. No. Why? Because she was blackmailing me. I almost dropped the phone. Blackmailing you? I repeated, my voice hoarse. Alex let out a humorless laugh. Yeah. She said if I didn't keep paying, she'd cut me off from Evan. Said he needed stability and that my money was the only thing keeping him in a good school, keeping his life normal. I was paying her an extra $5,000 a month for the past 4 years. My breath hitched. That was $240,000. Derek's $250,000. Alex's $240,000. Melanie had stolen $500,000. And now, both men were coming for her. Derek and Alex weren't just suing her anymore. They were pressing charges. Fraud, extortion, deception. Melanie was facing up to 5 years in prison. I sat in stunned silence, gripping my phone like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. You okay? Alex asked after a moment. I forced out a laugh. Honestly, I don't know. Well, at least she's finally getting what she deserves, he muttered. I wanted to agree, but deep down, a part of me still couldn't believe it. Melanie, the sister I grew up with, the person who had spent years making my life hell, was going to prison. And this time, there was no way out. I wanted to believe Lucas. I wanted to believe that the DNA test had been as much of a shock to him as it was to me, that he had no idea about Evan, that he wasn't a liar, that our relationship was still worth saving. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I suggested therapy. Lucas agreed immediately. Maybe he really wanted to fix things, or maybe he just wanted to convince me that he was still the man I thought I knew. Either way, we found a therapist, Dr. Rachel Levin, a soft-spoken woman in her mid-40s with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Our first session was tense. I sat stiffly on the couch, my arms crossed, while Lucas kept running his hand through his hair like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Rachel folded her hands in her lap. Emma, why don't we start with you? What do you need from Lucas to move forward? I hesitated. Then, honesty. Lucas flinched. Rachel nodded. Lucas, how does that make you feel? He let out a slow breath. Like I already gave her honesty. I laughed. A cold, humorless laugh. Oh, really? His jaw clenched. I didn't lie to you, Emma. I didn't know. I turned to Rachel. Do you see what I'm dealing with? He acts like I'm insane for questioning him, but how am I supposed to believe anything he says? Lucas groaned. Because I love you, Emma. Doesn't that count for anything? Rachel raised a hand, stopping us before things could escalate. Emma, do you believe Lucas loves you? I paused. I had spent years believing it. We had built a life together, planned a future. But now, all I could think about was the hesitation at the party, the lies, the way he had let me suffer in confusion instead of telling me the truth himself. I don't know anymore, I admitted. Lucas looked like I had punched him. The sessions continued for weeks. And for a while, I thought we were making progress. We talked about communication, about trust, about what it would take to rebuild the life we had planned. Lucas swore over and over that he had never known about Evan, that if he had, he would have told me, and I wanted to believe him. Until Melanie came back. It was a Thursday. I had just finished a solo therapy session, one where Rachel had gently asked me if I was really staying because I loved Lucas, or if I was staying because I was afraid to start over. The question had rattled me. I was walking to my car when I saw her. Melanie. She was leaning against my car door, arms crossed, her hair a mess, her eyes sharp. I should have ignored her. I should have gotten into my car and driven away. But instead, I found myself walking right up to her, my fists clenched. What do you want? She smiled. It wasn't friendly. To tell you the truth, I scoffed. Oh, that's rich, coming from you. She tilted her head. You're still with him, aren't you? I stiffened. That's none of your business. Her smile widened. So that means yes. I swallowed my pride. What do you want, Melanie? She exhaled, pushing off the car. Look, I have no reason to lie anymore. I lost custody. I lost everything. Her voice turned bitter. But there's one thing I still have, the truth. And I think you deserve to know it. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. Melanie's eyes gleamed. Lucas has known he was Evan's father for 6 years. The world tilted. I stared at her. That's not true. Oh, but it is. Her voice was almost mocking. I told him when Evan was barely a year old. I shook my head. You're lying. She laughed. Am I? Think about it, Emma. Think about all the times I tried to reach out to you over the years. Why do you think he always shut me down? My breath hitched. I thought back to all the times Melanie had tried to insert herself into my life. Holidays, birthdays, even random texts. Lucas had always been the one to brush it off. Ignore her, Emma. She just wants attention. It was true. Lucas had always gone out of his way to keep me away from Melanie. Because he knew. You're lying, I whispered. Melanie sighed. You want proof? She pulled out her phone and scrolled. Then, she held it out to me. I didn't want to look, but I did. And there it was. A 6-year-old text from Lucas to Melanie. Stop contacting me. I told you, I'm not doing this. Evan is better off without me in his life. I couldn't breathe. I read it again, and again, and again. Lucas knew. For 6 years. He had known he had a son. He had known Melanie was telling the truth, and he had hidden it from me. I looked up at her, my heart pounding. Why are you telling me this? Her smirk faded. Because I want to see you leave him, and I did. That night, I went home, packed a bag, and waited for Lucas to come back from work. When he walked through the door, he froze. He saw the suitcase, the look on my face, and his whole body tensed. Emma? I held up my phone, showed him the text. His face drained of color. I inhaled sharply. Tell me it's fake. Lucas's mouth opened, closed. His hands clenched. You knew. He exhaled. Emma, let me explain. No, my voice was steady. You let me humiliate myself at that party. You let me fight for you. You let me believe you were innocent. My chest ached. You let me love you. His eyes shone with panic. Emma, I made a mistake. No, I whispered. You made a choice. A heavy silence settled between us. I picked up my suitcase, walked past him. He didn't stop me. He didn't say anything. And just like that, it was over.